Hey everybody, Josh here with Pink Percolate Disc Golf, PDGA number 141336. This video is going to be all about the 3 discs that I think you should start out with from Westside Discs. So let's jump into it. So, let's say you're a new player and you've decided to jump into this wonderful sport of disc golf. Where do you start? You see all of these discs and you see all of these colors and you see all of these artworks and brands. It can be pretty overwhelming. But when you look online, you see all kinds of things that say, you should use this disc or you should use this disc. But really, when you start to look at Westside discs, it gets a little bit muddled. Westside doesn't have as much publicity as everybody else does right now, and I'm here to change that. So if you're like me and you decided, I think I'm going to throw these Westside discs because I really like the way they look. Because let's be honest, Westside has some of the best artwork. I want to be able to help you out with what discs I recommend a new player starts out with. I'm no different than anybody else on the internet. I'm going to tell you the same thing as every other video. When you first start playing disc golf, you should definitely start throwing a putter. It's exciting to see the drives go far, and it's exhilarating when you're able to throw one far. But if you start with a high-speed driver, you're going to get yourself frustrated and a little bit discouraged. Starting with a putter allows you to really start slow and work on the form and the basics of disc golf. Everybody's pretty much thrown a frisbee depending on where you're from and what interests you have. Whether it's at a barbecue with some friends or maybe you're at the beach, hanging out at the lake, just playing catch throwing a frisbee. And a disc golf disc is a little bit different than a frisbee, so I still recommend starting with a putter even if you've already thrown frisbees in the past. I didn't have any experience with anything round other than a baseball. I was a weirdo. I never threw a frisbee in my life until I picked up a disc golf disc. And I did the same thing that everybody else does and jumps out and says, I want to throw 500 feet like Drew Gibson, or I see Simon Lizotte throw putters 400 feet, so I can do that, no problem. And of course, after a month of playing, you realize, well, that's just not the case. The pros are pros because they go out and they practice with putters probably more than they practice with drivers. If you can throw a putter far, you can throw a driver far. But if you can throw a driver far, doesn't mean you can throw a putter far. And that's another thing that was kind of hard to get into your head to start out with. So, if you choose putters to start out with, which is the best choice, which putter do you go to? Personally, that's where this comes in for me. I recommend every new player starts out with a Swan 2. My Swan 2 here is in BT Medium, which is a fantastic plastic for new players. It's not too stiff, it's not too grippy, and it comes off the fingers really well. Now the Swan 2 does have a very similar disc, the Swan 1 Reborn. If you've been playing for a lot longer, I think that would be a better suit for you. But if you're just jumping into throwing a disc for the first time, I highly recommend you grab yourself a Swan 2 because of that little number right there. So the number there is a -1, and that's the turn number. Now, the turn number means how much is this disc going to deviate from a straight line once you've thrown it. And it's not the same as fade, which is how much is it going to come back after that deviation, but the turn is really how much is it going to either dump to the right if you're throwing forehand or dump to the left if you're throwing backhand before it fades back to center. The other thing that number really is important for us golfers with is it's the stability of a disc. A negative number means the disc is understable. An understable disc is easier for a beginner to throw for multiple reasons. You'll see that all 3 of these discs that I have selected are all understable discs. If you're starting out disc golf, you need to be throwing an understable disc because an overstable disc is going to hide all of your flaws. These understable discs allow you to really focus on slowing down, finding your mechanics, and understanding the differences of release angles, because this disc will do a little bit different on every release. And one of the things that is really important for beginning people to get down is getting a disc to fly flat and straight. With a little bit of understability, even if you release the disc on a little bit of what's called the hyzer angle, which would be this plane here. See, the top of the disc is pointing up, the bottom of the disc is pointing down, and it would make the disc fly in an arc this way. But an understable disc has a tendency to pop to flat and ride straight if you release on a little bit of hyzer. That's great for us beginners because it's really hard to throw a disc perfectly flat. If you crank on an understable disc perfectly flat, you'll see that that negative turn number comes into play and the disc will deviate to the right before it fades back to the middle. Now, the Swan 2s are amazing at showing you your form. They're also amazing at getting the technique down from just a standstill to all the way with your X step, because it's going to show you where your flaws are. This putter has taught me so many different things. It has really upped my game immensely. And if you're going to start out, I definitely recommend starting with a Swan 2 from Westside Discs, because it's understable enough that you'll get to see some nice flights out of it without being so understable that you'll dive into the ground or you'll throw rollers and you don't really understand what's going on. That -1 in the turn really helps for a beginner. So once you've thrown your Swan for a little while, and again, this is a Swan 2, once you've thrown it for a while, you're going to want to upgrade to the next thing. And once you've thrown it nice and flat and you've seen that little deviation, you're going to start to understand what the importance of an understability is in a disc, or what the importance of understability is in a disc. You'll upgrade to the next one. Now, the next disc that I recommend is a mid-range. It is the Westside Discs Tursas. Now, the Tursas is not talked about very much. It's kind of a cult classic. The Tursas has a little underground following because it is just such a nice disc. This baby can flip to flat and just right down the fairway. It's gorgeous when you get it to do it. The other thing is, if you get it a little bit too flat on your release, you'll get to see that really nice sweep right before it has a little bit of fade back to the left at the end. And again, that is on a backhand, right-hand, backhand release. You would change that if you're throwing forehand, or if you're throwing left-handed. It would pan to the left quite a bit before coming back right to the finish. The Tursas was a disc that I didn't bag for quite a long time just because not too many people talk about it. You see, all the pros are talking about the Gatekeeper, or they're talking about the Worship, because they have graduated past a beginner disc. Now, that's not to say that pros can't use the Tursas. There are quite a few pros that have quietly talked about the fact that they like this disc. There's a couple of pros that do come out pretty openly and say they like the Tursas. It depends really on what kind of courses you're playing and where you predominantly play. For us West Coasters, we have a lot of wooded courses, and the Tursas comes in handy because we really have a lot of throws that require that hyzer flip to flat, so that we can just get a nice flat flight out of our discs and not manage to go into trees on the left and right of the fairway or branches hanging over the fairway. The Tursas really taught me how to hyzer flip correctly after I graduated from my Swan 2. The Swan 2 taught me how to throw that little hyzer flip, the little baby hyzer flip, and it would start here and go boop. The Tursas, if I want to hyzer flip it, you really start it on a big angle and let it come up on its own and it'll go straight. Anything out of that big angle and you really will get a flat that'll kind of flip over to the right and fade back to the middle. But again, that understability in the Tursas is very beneficial for us new golfers. There is a discrepancy with the older run Tursases. Tursases? Get back to me, Danny Lindell. Let me know what the plural of Tursas is, please. But the older run Tursas have a -3 in the turn, whereas the newer Tursas, like this one, have a -2 in the turn. Now that's just something from old runs to new runs. The disc mold is exactly the same. There is no difference between the two discs here other than the plastic type, and I'll get into that in a second. But between the way these are shaped, they are shaped exactly identical. They weigh the same. The only difference is a newer run versus an older run. The third disc and final disc that I recommend, once you have figured out how to throw a mid-range, you're throwing in your mid-range 250, 300 every time, you feel like you're confident, you think, I'm finally ready, it's time, I'm going to send a big drive. This kid has taught me I can throw a Swan 2 really well. He said, throw the Tursas, and I threw the Tursas really well. So you're ready to graduate, Grasshopper. I think you know what the final disc is. It is one of the most popular Westside Disc molds, hands down. Everyone has one, everyone bags one, and it took me months to figure out why. Once I finally bagged one, I could not stop telling everyone how much I love this disc. It is an amazing disc for a beginner. It's an amazing disc for someone learning how to throw backhand, either left-handed, right-handed, it doesn't matter. Throwing forehand, it can get a little finicky, but for a beginning backhand player, I could not think of a better graduation disc when you're ready to throw a little bit faster than a 5-speed. You have to grab an Underworld, a Westside Disc Underworld. There is something magical about this disc. From beginners to professionals, from amateurs to little old men and ladies, everybody can throw an Underworld. It's a 7-speed with 6 glide, but it has a -2, has a -3 in its turn. Now, what does that mean? We know it means it's understable. With a faster disc that's understable, this baby is going to be able to pop up really quick and ride straight as an arrow. The Underworld has been used for years to teach new players how to throw a nice flat disc for distance. I think if you're brand new, not having thrown something like a frisbee or a disc too much in the past, you really should start with the putter. Like, that's just where you should be. If you've thrown some frisbees or you've thrown some discs and you think you can handle a 7-speed, go ahead and try it. If you're finding that it's still diving pretty early for you, it's a little bit too beefy, you're not having enough arm speed on the disc yet, step back, get yourself a Tursas. But if you're seeing that the Underworld isn't diving into the ground for you, it's not too overstable, throw it. Throw it, throw it, throw it. The Underworld has taught me the hyzer flip technique better than any disc. The Underworld has also taught me how to slow down on the T-pad. It's taught me how to focus on my reach back and pull through. I'm a big rounder. It comes from being forehand dominant, where rounding isn't as much of a problem. The Underworld really got me to focus on my pull through into the power pocket. You know, coming straight across the chest to here instead of coming way out and throwing. I can't say enough good things about the Underworld. So those are my 3 discs that I recommend that a new player picks up from Westside Discs if you're looking to start playing disc golf. Again, that would be the Swan 2 as a putter. Definitely recommend that. The Tursas as a mid-range. And that Underworld as your first driver. Now, technically, the Underworld is a fairway driver. It's a 7-speed, and the fast big boy drivers are 14 speeds. You don't need that. You won't need a 14-speed driver for probably a couple of years. A lot of people don't even have the arm speed to throw a 14-speed driver. But we do it anyways. You know my favorite disc is a Westside Discs World. It happens to be a very overstable 14-speed driver. But I can get almost the same distance with my Underworld that I can get with my World. That's just insanity to me. It means I need to do more field work, and I need to stop throwing 14-speed discs as much as I do. Because if you're getting the distance that you're getting with a 14-speed with a 7-speed, you are not getting that 14-speed up to speed. And what I mean by that is the speed of the disc spinning in the air, which we'll go over in another disc video. Don't even worry about it. The last thing I want to touch on, I've touched on it briefly, is plastic type. When you're a new player, you're absolutely going to be inundated with plastic types, plastic types, plastic types, all of these companies. Whose plastic type is best? Well, best is actually kind of subjective. Are you playing in the cold? Do you play in the heat? Do you play in the wet? Do you play where it's dry? Are you throwing through foliage and around a bunch of trees, or are you throwing somewhere that's wide open and you don't have to worry about hitting anything? These are all things that you think about when you're thinking about plastic type, but you also think about your shots, because this Underworld in Origio Burst flies completely different than this Underworld in VIP, which is a more durable plastic. The beginners, I definitely suggest you guys check out the Origio plastics. Yeah, it's a little cheaper and it gets dinged up and it gets beaten in really quick, but it'll teach you how to throw a disc better than something that's a little bit more overstable, like this VIP plastic from Westside. My Tursas I have in tournament plastic, which is more grippy, less slick than VIP plastic, but it is the same durability level. Now those are both high-grade plastics. When you start out, you don't need high-grade plastics because you're going to beat your discs up just like I've beat this Tursas up. You can see it's taken plenty of dings, scratches, scuffs, it's hit trees, it's hit asphalt, it's hit all kinds of things. But that's alright because I'm learning. And I don't want to do that to a disc that I'm going to throw on the course that I'm not learning with. I've learned it. So for me, I learned how to throw this Tursas in Origio plastic because I knew I was going to beat it up. But once I learned how to throw it, I graduated to the tournament plastic, which is a lot more durable, has a little bit of a different feel in the hand and a different feel in the fingers as it comes out, but the disc itself flies similarly enough that I know what it's going to do. And after a few rounds out at the field, I knew exactly what this disc was going to do and just how similar it was to the Origio. And so I bag it. I bag premium plastics because I know what I'm doing. And I know that out on the course, I know what shot I'm going to throw, and I'm not worried about really damaging a premium plastic disc, which you'd really have to try hard to damage a premium plastic disc. So in closing, I definitely recommend you check out Westside Discs. Get yourself a Swan 2. Once you've thrown the Swan 2 a bit and you feel confident, get yourself a Tursas. Enjoy the Tursas. Love the Tursas, learn the Tursas, have a bunch of fun with it, and graduate right on up to the Underworld. And you will definitely be pleased with your progress and how much you're able to send discs down the fairway, flat, straight, with little deviation, and getting the distance that you really want. Because, let's be honest, we all care about big distance. We should be caring about accuracy, but a lot of us care about the distance a little bit more. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys soon with another disc review video. Gonna be a Westside one, because that's what we throw here at Pink Bear Clay Disc Golf. Enjoy, you guys.